Welcome back to Ancient Edge, where we uncover the hidden ingenuity that shaped humanity's greatest struggles. Today, we explore something most World War II documentaries ignore: the relentless enemy that killed without mercy, that crept through supply lines and fortifications. We're talking about rot, decay, the silent, invisible force that threatened to unravel entire military operations from within. When we think of World War II, we envision strategic brilliance and technological innovation. But there's a darker chapter rarely told, one where soldiers became desperate alchemists, mixing bizarre concoctions and employing radical techniques to wage war against decay itself. The story you're about to hear is one of improvisation born from desperation, of solutions so unconventional they seemed impossible, until they actually worked. Imagine a world where your greatest threat isn't your enemy's bullets, but the weather, where victory could be snatched away not by superior force, but by fungus. This was the grim reality across every World War II theatre. Whether soldiers fought in jungle swamps, muddy trenches, or arid deserts, one enemy remained: constant decay. The problem was catastrophic in scope. Wooden fortifications rotted within weeks of being driven into damp earth. Leather equipment deteriorated in tropical humidity faster than soldiers could replace it. Food supplies fell victim to mold before soldiers could eat them. Canvas tents became breeding grounds for fungal infections that endangered lives. Even steel rusted at accelerated rates, corroding bolts and weakening crucial structural connections. This wasn't mere inconvenience, it was strategic catastrophe. When a wooden pillbox crumbled, an entire defensive position crumbled with it. When supply ships' cargo holds filled with mold-infested food, soldiers went hungry. When ammunition magazines corroded, weapons jammed at critical moments. Behind every collapsed fortification, every spoiled shipment, every failed weapon was decay, exacting a cost in lives as surely as any bomb. Official supply chains simply couldn't keep up. Factories produced weapons and ammunition, but they couldn't mass-produce rot prevention solutions fast enough. Soldiers in the field had one choice: innovate or perish. And innovate they did, using whatever materials lay at hand and whatever knowledge they possessed. The story begins with a principle as old as civilization. Isolation from moisture was the key to preservation. Roman engineers understood it. Medieval builders knew it. Now, on World War II battlefields, soldiers had to relearn these lessons in real time, adapting them with materials scavenged from devastated landscapes. One of the most effective solutions was deceptively simple: environmental control. Soldiers received explicit instructions to keep wooden supports and supplies elevated off the ground. They built crude stone foundations from battlefield rubble, creating air gaps beneath critical materials. This allowed moisture to evaporate rather than accumulate. They oriented structures to maximize ventilation, angled wooden beams so rainwater ran off, and spaced materials widely apart rather than stacking them densely where humidity became trapped. This wasn't theory in textbooks. It was survival knowledge being transmitted from seasoned engineers to frightened soldiers who had never built anything before the war. An officer who had worked as a carpenter explained why an ammunition crate had to be angled, why gaps between planks mattered, why prevailing wind direction determined structure orientation. Every decision was guided by desperate urgency and the understanding that the margin between functionality and catastrophic failure was measured in millimeters and hours. But environmental control alone couldn't solve every problem. This is where the ancient wisdom of tar and pitch preservation emerged. For centuries, civilizations had discovered that coating wood with tar and pitch created barriers the elements couldn't penetrate. In World War II, soldiers rediscovered and weaponized this knowledge. Tar, a byproduct of coal distillation, became, well, liquid gold on the battlefront. When applied to wood, it formed a waterproof seal while releasing phenolic compounds, naturally fungicidal agents that repelled the microorganisms responsible for rot. Application methods were crude but effective. Soldiers mixed tar with binding agents, sometimes heating it to improve coverage. A wooden post submerged in tar mixture and left to cure became chemically preserved. It was the same principle that had protected Viking ships and medieval cathedrals, now desperately repurposed to protect soldiers. Perhaps most ingenious was the revival of charring. Soldiers intentionally burned the bases of critical wooden supports, pillbox posts, ammunition frames, structural beams, creating a blackened carbon barrier. This burnt layer was naturally resistant to fungal penetration, insect invasion, and water absorption. A post could be partially charred over a fire in hours, creating months of additional protection. Veterans would later recall the distinctive smell of burning timber mixed with creosote, a smell that meant they'd just purchased time. Bizarre chemistry and unconventional materials. These were the tools of survival, forged in the chaos of war. Soldiers, driven by necessity, turned to whatever could be found, repurposing everyday substances in ways that, honestly, no one could have predicted. As the war progressed, field engineers reached for substances bordering on the alchemical. Salvaged motor oil, considered waste, became a precious preservative. Soldiers learned that coating wooden structures or leather equipment with used motor oil created a hydrophobic barrier. Water beaded off rather than soaking in. The oil also contained residual compounds with mild antimicrobial properties. It looked terrible and smelled worse, but it worked. A leather strap treated with motor oil survived months in tropical humidity that would have destroyed untreated leather within weeks. Creosote, the coal tar derivative long used for railroad ties, became a deployed industrial preservative. Painted or injected into timber with remarkable results, wooden structures treated with creosote didn't just resist rot, they became actively hostile to decay-causing organisms. The substance was toxic to fungi and bacteria, yet safe enough for human contact. In jungle theatres, soldiers discovered that local plant extracts, boiled bark, sap concentrations, ash residue, possessed preservative properties understood through empirical observation rather than science. Local indigenous peoples had known these secrets for generations. By necessity and humility, soldiers learned them too. Did these desperate measures actually work? The answer is yes. Archival photographs document fortifications standing relatively intact, years later when they should have collapsed. Field reports quantify reductions in supply spoilage and equipment failure. Medical records show that improvised preservation and wound treatment techniques measurably reduced infection rates. In the Pacific, moisture and salt air corroded ammunition within weeks, creating dangerous misfires. Engineers elevated ammunition on makeshift racks, treated wooden crates with tar, applied motor oil to metal casings, and created ventilation systems.